This is something major. The folks at Infinix sent over a Zero Ultra for me to play with and share some thoughts. This is a really fun brand, making interesting phones, some really solid tech features, lifestyle features, and arriving at competitive price points. It's a label alongside companies like Poco and Redmi that really helped reframe the value proposition of targeted, purpose-built, affordable options. As an American, Western-focused reviewer, this has really helped me put some of this tech into perspective. Just because a phone is inexpensive, it doesn't mean it should be punishing to use when covering the basics. But the Zero Ultra is something different. Infinix has been releasing devices moving steadily up the food chain, and with this phone, they have significantly more expensive mid-rangers in their sights. Now, starting off with design, it reminds me a bit of phones like the LG Velvet and the TCL 20 Pro. Now, curved screens might not be for everyone, but this is a sleek, skinny build with clean lines, and the rear has this kind of zebra-striped texture and reflective surface. And if you decide you want to go caseless, there is a bit more of a pattern to help you grip the phone better. That said, there are accessories in the box. There is a bumper case if you want to keep your phone a little bit better protected, alongside headphones, a headphone dongle, and a really fast charger. We'll talk about that in just a bit. The screen is a really pretty 1080p OLED with 120 Hz high refresh, and that's another thing we'll cover when we talk about performance. It's a hallmark of any brand trying to step up their products, make them look a little bit more premium, that we get an in-display mounted fingerprint sensor. I think this is a little low. It's kind of on that bottom chin of the phone for how tall and skinny the screen is, but the sensor is nicely responsive. It's better than a Pixel 6a, but maybe not as consistent as a OnePlus or Xiaomi optical in-display sensor. The haptics are solid, if not quite my favorite. It's kind of a subtle dop feel when you're typing. I'm trying to verbalize what a haptic motor sounds like. It's a pretty good feel, but the speakers are some of the best I've heard on an Infinix yet, especially for being better balanced between the top and bottom drivers. Plus, at full volume, you can kind of feel a little extra vibration or resonance on the backplate. It almost works. It almost feels like the boombox design from old LG phones. Set it on an empty box, and there's just enough vibration that it kind of juices up the sound a little. Internal specs are also on point. We've got a MediaTek Dimensity 920. That's plenty of horsepower for something living in the mid-range, even slightly more upper mid-range. It's overkill for daily driver communication and steps into a better tier for mobile gaming. As far as I know, there will only be a 256 gig version of this phone, so the lack of a memory card slot is a little less painful. All in all, it's a powerful phone when you really lean into a single task, like video editing, podcast mixing, and photo editing. I'm getting scores in my tests that generally outperform Snapdragon 765s, and a few standout tests nipping at the heels of Snapdragon 855s. The one area where this immediately can use just a bit more polish is on that refresh rate. There were numerous times in adaptive refresh and 120 Hz locked where the phone took a bit to properly wake up and respond to what I was doing. Most noticeably if I'd just been letting it sit there for a while in a low power mode, unlock it, and I'd go directly to the app drawer and we'd see it really chug trying to get into my apps. Switching down to 60 Hz seemed to eliminate most of those moments. It wasn't trying to scale the screen anymore. And also 60 Hz looks pretty good when you properly fill 60 frame per second animation. So I'd probably recommend just leaving it there for now, getting slightly better battery life, or at least until we see an update that might clean up the high refresh rate modes a little bit. Which brings us to the software, and this is really familiar from previous Infinix phones. XOS is the custom skin running on top of Android 12. We've got playful animations, some great widgets and folders. I like this large folder where you've got like 4 available icons and then you can tap the folder for more. There's a surprising amount of customization that you can really dig into. Theming tools, additional AI and schedule management tools. There's Folax, which is an extra voice assistant that can read your texts and manage your contacts. Multi-window shortcuts, also just a panel that you can pull out from your back button swipe. This isn't a cheap phone with just stock Android slapped onto it. There's a lot of extra stuff to dig into. That being said, I absolutely hate the split notification shade from the control actions. I really wish manufacturers would stop using this, copying the iPhone and making these gestures more specific to the top edges of the screen. I really want all of this properly Androided in one continuous vertical stripe. But Infinix has fixed my other biggest issue with their UI in the past. On older phones, you would swipe up the notification shade, and swiping down, you couldn't get out of the app drawer from swiping down. Now, when you swipe up, you get your app drawer, and when you swipe down, it clears the app drawer, taking you back to your home screen. I'm so happy it works the way it always should have. And that brings me to the critical component. This phone has a monster camera on tap. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. Only last year did we see more premium phones like the Pixel 6, Xperia Pro I, and X70 Pro Plus start using these big 1/1.3 inch type sensors. Only this year has Apple started using a larger pixel binning sensor. This roughly $500 phone has an even bigger sensor than all the phones I just listed. It's the same 200 megapixel shooter found in the just newly released Xiaomi 12T Pro. Not the 12T that I got to review, the 12T Pro. Staying consistent with the numbers, it's a 1/1.22 inch type sensor. The inch measurements are getting really silly with these kinds of fractions, but the optics are solid, the performance is very good, and the photo processing is punching well above this phone's price tag. I like the look of some of the photos here better than the vibrance and saturation applied to the 12T that I just reviewed. Now, the aperture doesn't look as exciting on paper, but the equivalent focal length and depth of field resembles a 23mm lens on a full frame camera at f6.5. It's gonna get outperformed by Pixels and Vivos and Xiaomi Ultras, but that's an eminently photographic look for a phone camera at any price. Just doing something silly. I can show you this close-up of my daughter's candy bowl, and you can't see what an utter catastrophe my sink currently is. It's my turn to do the dishes. I'm shooting a phone review. Now, the processing can get a bit ratcheted and vibrant when the HDR kicks on. These new 9:1 pixel binning sensors can get really saturated, and some of that processing, I think companies still need some more time tuning the output of this 9:1 pixel bin, but their ability to gather light and produce a natural looking depth of field focus fall off, just absolutely stunning. There is also a pretty decent 13 megapixel ultra wide on tap. It's fine. The photos are good. I'm telling you, you're gonna live out of this main sensor. I've got so much praise for still photography. The video is okay. I'm used to seeing these big sensors on significantly more expensive phones. So 4K at 30 frames per second in this price tier, I think is reasonable, especially considering the SoC against this camera hardware. The challenging bit for video, there is no software stabilization that I can find, but thankfully we do have some optical image stabilization, some lens stabilization to sort of minimize the handshake. Even if you try to hold still though, you'll see a bit of that lens shift just from your fingers and arm, your muscles being a human, but it won't be as shaky as video from previous Infinix phones that lacked any kind of stabilization. The selfie shooter is fine. I'm just not the guy to really chat selfies, though I do think it's kind of a fun touch where it has its own front-mounted LED flash. It's the fun thing about having just like a little forehead strip of bezel. You can put some practical stuff in there to play with. It's kind of cool. But really, I cannot praise the rear cameras enough. They soak up light incredibly well, and while the results won't be quite as well processed as a Pixel or a Vivo, it's got one of the fastest night mode scans I've ever tested with a shutter action that's more responsive than a Galaxy S22. Infinix cameras in the past have always been fine. The Zero Ultra is fun. Lastly, wrapping up the nuts and bolts, I don't get great reception or proper band support for network coverage in my area on this phone. Battery life has been excellent for that more limited use because we've got a good sized battery and a medium power SoC. So just a little management from the user, you should be able to get a solid 2 days of use on a single charge. Whenever I say things like that, I find people tend to use their phones more aggressively. So you'll use the phone more and then you'll be back down to a single day of charge. But I don't really feel you need to worry about that recharging because in the box is this massive 180 watt charger. On a variety of these new phones coming out, these super speed chargers are ridiculous. And in practical use, I think we're actually outperforming the company's estimates. From a low battery warning, I wasn't completely drained, but the phone gave me a low battery warning. I got back up to 90% in about 9 minutes. Infinix estimates a full charge from 0 to 100 should only take about 12 minutes, and that vibes with my testing. So there's no wireless charging on tap, and I really can't be bothered. I would recommend folks keep a slower charger, like an older phone charger handy if you like to plug in overnight. And you can also dig into the advanced battery modes, which are surprisingly robust for a phone in this category if you need a little additional runtime. But when you need to top it off fast, 5 minutes on the included in the box charger, 5 minutes should power you for more than a day. Wrapping this all up, depending on region and currency, this phone ballparks for roughly $500 US. I guarantee you it will not get the kind of software support or longevity that you would expect from a Pixel or an iPhone somewhere in this price ballpark, but it's hardware that starts competing more directly with Xiaomi 12Ts, OnePlus 10Ts, and it'll likely be a lot less expensive in any market where those phones might compete on store shelves. This is always exciting to me, watching how brands evolve. Like, I kind of can't take just one phone as a standalone review. It's like each phone is a new chapter of a story. The Zero Ultra is a really exciting addition to this saga. So I will, of course, leave some links down below, more information on the Infinix Zero Ultra. And if you live in a region where they will ship this phone, it's one to consider. I would shop this for a very good camera at a great price. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. All the support lately has been amazing. Those of you who are checking out the links, if you're hitting my home site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, shopping a little merch, or joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. These folks are the coolest collection of tech pals in the universe. So I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch. Not so much on the Facebooks or the Instagrams, but I will catch you all on the next video.